Okay, hello everyone. So my name is Isabella Campbell, and I'm an undergraduate sociology student at UCI. This quarter, I was able to do an independent research project. So I was studying LGBTQ plus curriculum in K through 12 public education. In order to do this, I did a case study of University High School in Irvine Unified School District, IUSD. And essentially, with this research, I was trying to find out what are the biggest factors in including LGBTQ plus topics in public education, and then signaling in on the school district, seeing like how that implementation occurs and how that would look across different schools in the district. So here's a bit of overview. These are the topics that I'll be covering in the presentation today. And then first off, we'll start off with some background. So why LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum matters. So first off, exclusion is the most basic form of bias. So by not including certain perspectives of different communities, that can actually lead to exclusion, but also discrimination. Also, students report feeling more supported when they have diverse perspectives included in their curriculum. So that also includes having LGBTQ plus people represented in their education. And then this is also associated with safer learning environments and overall academic success. So any DEI inclusion of any sort in education actually does foster success in the classroom. And then I wanted to include this snapshot of the Movement Advancement Project map. So this is from 2024, and as you can see, it illustrates curricular laws across the country relating to LGBTQ plus curricular laws. So as you can see, only 8 states in the US actually have inclusive curricular standard laws. 23 states actually don't have any of these laws, and then even 19 have restrictive laws, so censorship laws. So as you can see, there's a large variation across the U.S. With which states have these inclusive laws and then which ones actually censor it. So now focusing in on policy context in California specifically. So in 2011, California passed the Fair Education Act. So this requires LGBTQ plus inclusion in social science curriculum as well as in health education. California was the first state to mandate this sort of law. So out of the 8 states that we saw that actually have these laws in place, California was the first one. In 2017, California adopted 10 textbooks compliant with the Fair Education Act. And then one other case study that I read about when I was doing research, in 2015, a San Francisco high school was actually the first in the country to launch a dedicated LGBTQ plus studies course. It was open to any students in the school who wanted to take the course. I think the statistic was that 19% of the students were identified as LGBTQ plus, and actually 19% of the students who enrolled in the class also identified as LGBTQ plus. So that was a pretty equal representation as well. And then this just goes to show that these sorts of courses can be included, and this was sort of a first step for that. So this leads to the gaps in policy implementation. So these are sort of the gaps that I found in the literature when I was doing my research. So first thing is policy versus practice. So although the Fair Education Act mandates LGBTQ plus inclusion, the extent of its integration into everyday classroom remains unclear. So there's really no studies done to see how it's implemented in the everyday classroom and sort of how it's taught consistently over time. The second is depth of integration. So when LGBTQ plus content is included, it's unclear whether it's included as like an isolated lesson or unit, or if it's more so embedded in the curriculum throughout the academic year. So like actually if the framework of the curriculum changes or if it's just an added in unit. And then the final gap that I found was local variation across the state. So differences in district guidance, school enforcement, and teacher discretion may shape an uneven implementation of the FAIR Act. So even though this is a statewide mandate, the extent to which different districts and schools have autonomy could vary over across the state. So this leads into the research question. So I was hoping to address some of these gaps. How and to what extent is LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum implemented in California K-12 public schools in accordance with state mandates such as the Fair Education Act? And then sort of a sub-question of this that I wanted to find out was what other school and district level factors shape implementation? Excuse me. So, for the theoretical framework that I used, it's multicultural education theory. So, when I was doing my research, I came across this theory multiple times. It was coined by James Banks's four-level model for multicultural curriculum implementation in 1990. So, essentially, what this is it's a theory that suggests that educators have different levels with the way that they include DEI curriculum into their education. So, for example, like level one, this is more of the baseline level. Educators will just throw in a few historical figures or holidays and then call it a day. And that's sort of like the first level of inclusion. The second level of inclusion is additive. So instead of just having a few extra people thrown in, they'll do actual units and lessons on that education. And then the third level is transformation. So instead of just adding in the units, they'll actually change the framework of the curriculum. So these diverse perspectives will be embedded throughout the entire academic year. And then the fourth level is social action. So educators will encourage their students to actually make change in their community and advocate for different communities. And then when I was doing my research, I was hoping to see either a level 3 or a level 4 for IUSD. So for my methodology, as I mentioned, I did a case study. So I examined LGBTQ plus curriculum specifically at University High School in Irvine Unified School District. And then the three ways that I was able to study this was document analysis, media and public materials, and email outreach. So I reviewed district and school websites, any relevant textbook and curriculum documents, and just overall board policies. I researched also like online news and social media coverage of advocacy for LGBTQ plus inclusion. And then I also contacted 17 university high school social science teachers and IUSD board members and asked them further questions about their curriculum and implementation and how that's seen in the classroom every day. So for my findings, I split it into two separate slides. So first, this will cover like the curriculum and policies. So based on the email responses and then research that I did on the school and district websites, these were the findings. So LGBTQ plus curriculum is not just like a standalone program at IUSD, and instead it's integrated into the teaching. Sexuality and sexual orientation is incorporated into health education courses, and this is required for grades 7 through 12. Parents also cannot selectively opt their students out of these health education courses. So while a parent can opt their student out of like the health classes as a whole, they can't opt it out of LGBTQ plus specific content because that would be exclusive. And then that was under IUSD Board Policy 6142, last revised in 2017. And then curriculum frameworks are guided by the California Department of Education. So I was able to find the actual online PDF of this. It's the California History Social Science Framework, and this was chapter 16 that I found this in. And then as a result of the statewide framework, LGBTQ plus perspectives are incorporated into high school U.S. history instead of across all disciplines. So this primarily shows up during the periods of World War II, civil rights, and the Cold War. And then individual schools in the district also select textbooks that are aligned with this framework, and they're later approved by the district. And then I found this in Board Policy 6161.1, selection of instruction materials. And then for my second set of findings, this is more focused on school and community resources. So I found this through, again, the school website, but also relevant social media pages also had this information. So I found that IUSD has an LGBTQ plus community webpage that provides resources for students, parents, family, and staff. This page includes mental health resources, LGBTQ plus terminology, which is helpful for both LGBTQ plus people and also for education purposes in general. They also have students' rights information and family support materials. So I also found that the district hosts a quarterly LGBTQ plus advocacy group meeting, and they share resources and they connect advocates throughout the community. And then doing a little bit more research, I found that this group also is active on Instagram. So I looked through their posts from the most recent years, and I found that they consistently post about this quarterly meeting. In addition, they do like tabling events. I saw a flyer for card making events for members of the community. and also they participate in OC-wide Pride events. And then University High School also did have a Pride Club, so I was able to find their Instagram, but they haven't posted since 2022. So if I were to continue this research, I would be curious to see if the Pride Club had any hand in like doing advocacy for curriculum specifically. Excuse me. And then my discussion. So also this is just a flyer that I found for that community advocacy group that I thought was relevant. But overall, in my discussion, LGBTQ plus topics are integrated into existing courses and they're not a standalone curriculum. We see that implementation is influenced by state frameworks and district policies more so than anything else. Schools also have the flexibility in textbook selection, so that may create variation in the instruction. Different schools in the same district may be using different textbooks. And then support for LGBTQ plus students actually extends beyond curriculum and is also seen through clubs, community groups, and other events as well. So finally, in the conclusion, some suggestions that I would have for future research, either from me or from someone else, I would say focus more on classroom level implementation. I think it'd be interesting to focus like on one classroom and see how they implement curriculum throughout the school year. Also having a greater analysis of community and media discourse, because a lot of the sources that I found were like the school and district websites, but less of these sorts of sources. And then also my findings relied primarily on publicly available documents, so doing a little bit more extensive research on that as well. And then maybe focusing on more than one district and one school. I think it'd be interesting to do different districts throughout California, or even focusing on one district specific, but looking at different schools within that district and doing a comparative analysis. And then for my key takeaways, so LGBTQ plus inclusion in IUSD is integrated into both health and social science courses. Going back to the theoretical framework that I used, this reflects Banks's level 3 transformation approach. So essentially, instead of having just isolated units or lessons, IUSD actually integrates diverse perspectives, including LGBTQ plus perspectives, into their curriculum framework overall. Inclusion also appears through different school resources and community initiatives rather than just education. My findings primarily addressed the gap in literature, which was the depth of LGBTQ plus curriculum integration. And then another note that I had is that although I did find that there's a lot of inclusion in like history and social science, I think it's important that inclusion happens across other disciplines as well, and that it should be framed as a continual discussion over time because there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made, as we can see. Excuse me. As we can see, so many states in the US still don't have these curricular laws in place. And so a lot of schools, again, still even have censorship laws. So it's important that this is an ongoing discussion rather than something that we frame as just in the past. And that does conclude my research. So thank you so much. These are the references that I used. I really enjoyed presenting for your class today. And if you guys have any questions about any of this, I would be happy and feel free to reach out. But other than that, thank you so much.